My husband moved my inheritance into his name while on a golf trip with someone new. Then he called. Welcome back with a new real shock story. Before we start, comment and tell me which city you're watching from. At the end, don't forget to subscribe and rate it from 0 to 10. Let's enjoy the story, everyone.
I never imagined my life could twist so suddenly, the way it did that morning. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone, my hands trembling because I had just received a message that made my heart pound like it was trying to escape my chest. It wasn't just any message, it was from him, the one I thought I was going to spend my life with. The words felt like a knife slicing through everything I believed about us. I need to postpone our wedding, he wrote. I stared at the screen for a long time, unable to breathe. Postpone, the word repeated in my mind like a warning I didn't want to hear. I could feel my stomach sink, a heavy, twisting knot that made my vision blur. I thought I was dreaming, that any moment I would wake up from this nightmare and he would be smiling, telling me it was a joke. But there it was, plain and cold, staring back at me. I need to explore my feelings for someone else. My hands fell to my lap, shaking. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I couldn't understand. How could someone you trust so completely tell you that? And 3 weeks before our wedding, the timing made it unbearable, almost cruel. I remember pacing around my small apartment. The walls suddenly too close, the air too thick. I kept thinking of every little thing he had done, every promise we had shared. Had it all been a lie? Or was he truly confused, trapped in his own emotions? I tried to breathe, tried to tell myself that maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe there was still hope, but the doubt clawed at me with sharp, relentless fingers. I could feel my chest tighten with every heartbeat. I wanted to scream, to call him, to demand answers, but my voice refused to work. I felt frozen, trapped in this sudden, unbearable reality. I went to the window and looked out at the city below. People were going about their mornings, oblivious to the storm that had just hit my life. I envied their normalcy, their ability to walk without feeling like the ground beneath them could crumble at any second. I thought about our engagement, the rings, the plans, the excitement that had filled every corner of my heart just weeks ago. And now, all of it seemed fragile, like a glass ornament that could shatter with the smallest touch. My mind raced, flipping through memories, our laughter, the way he held my hand, the whispered promises late at night. And suddenly, I didn't know if any of that had been real. I didn't know who he was anymore, or if I had ever truly known him. I sank to the floor, hugging my knees to my chest, and let the tears fall. I had never cried like this before, not in front of anyone. There was a hollow ache in my chest, a weight that pressed down on me so heavily it felt like I couldn't breathe. My phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look, but my curiosity won over. It was another message, short and detached. I'm sorry, I didn't want to hurt you, but I need to figure this out. That was it. No explanation, no clarity, just an apology that felt like ash in my hands. The words made my stomach churn. My mind screamed at me to run, to escape, to make him explain why he could even think of leaving me for someone else. But I stayed frozen, letting the cold reality seep into my bones. I remembered the weeks leading up to this moment, the excitement of picking flowers for the wedding, the endless lists, the laughter of our families, the nights spent planning a future I had thought was certain. Everything seemed so perfect, like a story that had no chance of ending badly. And yet, here I was, alone in my apartment, feeling like the rug had been pulled from under me without warning. How had I missed the signs, the tiny hesitations, the distracted glances, the moments that now seemed like cracks in the foundation I had believed unbreakable? I felt foolish, naive, but most of all, I felt heartbroken. Completely, irreparably broken. I didn't know how long I stayed on the floor, letting the sobs shake my body, letting the anguish consume me. Time lost meaning. Minutes and hours blended together, and I couldn't tell if I was crying for the love I had lost, or for the trust that had been shattered, or for the person I thought I was, who had believed in something that now seemed so fragile. Eventually, I got up, my legs weak and unsteady. I moved to the mirror and looked at myself. My eyes were red, swollen from crying, my hair messy, my face pale. And in that reflection, I didn't see the same Alec Rose who had been laughing, planning, dreaming. I saw someone raw, exposed, someone who had been stripped of certainty in a single, cruel moment. I wanted to scream at my reflection, to demand answers, to demand justice, but there was no one to answer, no one to explain, just the hollow echo of a future that might never come. I tried to distract myself, to focus on the small things, the dishes, the laundry, the coffee I had forgotten to make, but nothing worked. Every sound, every movement, every thought brought me back to him, to the words that had crushed me, to the questions that had no answers. I imagined him with someone else, laughing, sharing the moments that I had thought were ours alone. The thought made my chest ache, a twisting pain that left me breathless. And yet, even in that agony, I couldn't hate him, not completely. I wanted to understand, to hold on to the hope that this was just confusion, that love could survive mistakes, that somehow, some way, we could fix what had been broken. But the fear, the betrayal, and the uncertainty loomed over me like a storm I couldn't escape. That night, I lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of everything. The silence of my apartment was deafening, echoing the chaos inside me. I thought about our conversations, our laughter, the plans we had made, and I realized something terrifying. Nothing would ever be the same. My life had changed in ways I couldn't yet comprehend, and the worst part was the waiting, the not knowing, the agonizing question of whether this was the end, or if there was still a chance to reclaim what I had lost. As the hours dragged on, one thought kept repeating in my mind: how could someone I loved so deeply, someone I had trusted completely, suddenly become a stranger? The morning came, pale and gray, and I felt no relief. The sunlight that filtered through my window seemed cold, indifferent to my pain. I knew I had to face the world eventually, to pretend that everything was normal. But inside, I felt shattered, fragile, and raw. And yet, amidst the tears, the confusion, and the heartbreak, a small, stubborn spark remained. I would survive this. I didn't know how, and I didn't know when, but I would find a way to keep going. Because even in the midst of betrayal, even when the person you love the most turns away, life doesn't stop. And somehow, neither can you. I stepped out of my apartment that morning feeling hollow, like a part of me had been carved away in the night. The city was alive with its usual chaos, cars honking, people rushing to work, footsteps echoing on the pavement, but none of it reached me. I moved like a ghost, my hands stuffed into my coat pockets, my mind replaying his words over and over. I need to explore my feelings for someone else. It wasn't just shocking, it was devastating. Every step I took felt heavier than the last, like the air itself was pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. I kept thinking that maybe if I walked far enough, if I distracted myself with the rhythm of the city, the pain would fade. But it didn't. It only grew sharper, twisting in my chest like a living thing. I found myself at our favorite park, the one we used to go to on lazy Sunday afternoons, where he would toss a frisbee and I would laugh until my cheeks hurt. The swings creaked in the wind, the benches were empty, and the smell of wet grass reminded me of every happy memory we had made there. Sitting down on one of the benches, I wrapped my coat tighter around me, trying to hold on to some warmth, some sense of comfort. But comfort was gone, replaced by a heavy uncertainty. My phone buzzed again, and I froze, dreading it. It was him. I didn't open the message. I couldn't. Not yet. I needed time to breathe, to gather myself, to remember who I was before my life had been thrown into chaos. I thought back to the small moments I had ignored, the tiny cracks in our relationship that I had convinced myself didn't matter, the times he had seemed distracted, the subtle tension in his voice, the fleeting looks that lingered on someone else. I had brushed them off, telling myself it was nothing, that we were just stressed, that love was messy sometimes. But now, all those moments made sense, and the clarity was unbearable. I had loved him blindly, without considering that he might not feel the same way or that his feelings could change so suddenly. I felt anger rising inside me, fierce and hot, threatening to burn through the sorrow. How could he betray me like this? How could he even consider loving someone else when we had planned a life together? The questions twisted in my mind, and every answer I imagined made me feel more hollow, more broken. Hours passed, and the city continued around me, oblivious to the storm inside my heart. I watched couples walking hand in hand, laughing, sharing moments I once thought were only mine and his. The world felt cruelly indifferent, and I felt smaller with every passing second. Like I was invisible, like my pain didn't matter. And yet, I couldn't turn away. I needed to feel it all, to live through the rawness of this heartbreak, to let it carve itself into my memory. Because I knew, somehow, that if I didn't confront this, I would lose myself entirely. Later that afternoon, I went back home, hoping to find some distraction, something to anchor me. I tried music, tried reading, even tried cleaning, but my thoughts kept circling back to him, to the life we had imagined, to the wedding we had planned. Each memory was a knife, sharp and precise, cutting deeper than the last. I realized I didn't just feel sad or betrayed, I felt lost. The ground beneath me had shifted, and I didn't know where to step next. Every plan I had made, every hope I had nurtured, felt like it had been built on sand. And yet, I couldn't give up entirely. Somehow, I had to find a way through this, to survive the emptiness, to reclaim the pieces of myself that had been scattered by his sudden absence. That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the city outside. Feeling the loneliness press against me like a living thing, I thought about calling my best friend, about telling someone, anyone, about the betrayal, but I didn't. There was a part of me that felt embarrassed, humiliated, as if admitting the truth would make it more real, more painful. And yet, I couldn't hold it all in either. I whispered his name into the darkness, not expecting an answer, not even wanting one. Just saying it made the hollow ache in my chest sharper. But it also reminded me that I was still alive, still human, still capable of feeling, even in the face of heartbreak. The next morning brought no relief. I woke up feeling raw, like my heart had been stripped bare overnight. I had to leave my apartment again, had to move through the world despite the heaviness that clung to me. I went to the cafe where I had spent countless mornings laughing with him, imagining that somehow being there would bring me comfort, but it didn't. Every corner, every table, every sound reminded me of him. I drank my coffee in silence, watching strangers around me, feeling a sense of isolation that was almost physical. I realized that life had moved on for everyone else, and yet, for me, it had frozen. The world had continued its rhythm, indifferent to the way mine had been shattered. By midday, I found myself wandering aimlessly, retracing streets we had walked together, sitting on benches where we had once shared secrets, and touching walls that had felt like home when he was with me. Each memory was like a ghost, haunting me, reminding me of what had been stolen, what had been taken before I even realized it. I felt anger, sorrow, confusion, and fear all at once, a tangled storm that made every breath difficult. And, through it all, a small, stubborn part of me refused to break completely. It whispered that I was stronger than this, that even in betrayal and heartbreak, I could survive. I clung to that thought like a lifeline, fragile but real, a reminder that I had to keep moving, even if I didn't yet know where I was going. That as night fell, I returned to my apartment, exhausted, emotionally drained, and unsure of what the next day would bring. I knew one thing with certainty: nothing would ever be the same. The man I had trusted with my heart had changed, or maybe I had only just seen the truth of who he really was. Either way, I had to face it, and I had to face myself. I lay down, staring at the ceiling, tears pooling once again in my eyes, and whispered into the silence, how did it come to this? The question had no answer, and yet I couldn't stop asking it, because in the asking, in the living through the pain, I was still here, still breathing, still Alec Rose, still fighting to find a way back to me. The next few days felt like I was moving through a fog. Every sound, every sight, every little thing reminded me of him, and yet I couldn't bring myself to reach out. I needed answers, but I was too scared of what I might hear, too scared of confirming what I already feared. The apartment felt emptier than ever, and even the walls seemed to close in, pressing against me as if they, too, mourned the life that had been ripped away. I kept imagining him, imagining the other person, imagining their laughter, the quiet moments I had once believed were ours alone. It made my chest tighten, my stomach knot, and sometimes I felt like I was going to collapse under the weight of it all. I remember walking down the street one afternoon, the late summer sun glaring in my eyes, the warmth doing nothing to soften the ache in my heart. People passed me by, their faces familiar yet strange in a world that suddenly seemed alien. I saw couples holding hands, children playing, friends laughing, and each sight felt like a cruel reminder that life went on, that happiness continued elsewhere. While I was stuck in this endless loop of heartbreak and questions, I wanted to scream at the world, to demand that it pause, that it recognize the storm raging inside me. But I didn't. I walked on, head down, feeling every step like a punishment. I kept thinking about the phone messages, rereading them over and over in my mind. How could he say he needed to figure out his feelings for someone else? How could he betray everything we had shared? And yet, somewhere deep down, a part of me clung to the hope that it wasn't permanent, that this was just confusion, that love could survive mistakes, even ones this painful. But that hope was fragile, like a candle flickering in a storm. Every memory of his touch, his laugh, his promises, fought with the reality of his words, leaving me dizzy, unsteady, unsure of what was real and what was imagined. One evening, I went to our favorite cafe, the one where we had shared countless late-night coffees and whispered dreams. Sitting alone at our usual table, I stared at the empty chair across from me, imagining him there, imagining the conversations we would have had if none of this had happened. The waiter brought my coffee without a word, and I nodded, barely noticing, my mind lost in the tangle of memories and fears. I felt a strange mix of anger and longing, a tug-of-war inside me that made me feel fragile, raw, and exposed. The cafe, once a place of warmth and laughter, felt cold, distant, a mirror of the emptiness spreading inside me. That night, I didn't go home. I walked aimlessly, the city lights blurring as tears ran down my face. I found myself in a small park, the one where we had once planned our future together. The swings creaked in the wind, empty and lonely, and I sat on one of them, letting the memories wash over me. I thought about our plans, the dreams we had shared, the rings we had chosen, and the life I had believed in with all my heart. And then I realized, painfully, that none of it mattered anymore. At least not in the way I had thought. He had changed the story without asking me, without even a warning. And in that moment, I felt a despair so deep, so consuming, that it threatened to swallow me whole. I remember calling my best friend that night, my voice trembling as I tried to explain the storm inside me. Words failed me. I could barely articulate the betrayal, the heartbreak, the sense of being abandoned by someone I had trusted completely. She listened, of course, offering comfort. But I could hear the hesitation in her voice, the way she paused, unsure of what to say. And I understood there were no words that could fix this, no advice that could mend the hole in my heart. It was mine alone to endure, mine alone to navigate. And the weight of that realization pressed down on me until I felt crushed. Days turned into nights, nights into more days, and I felt myself slipping into a strange routine of survival. I went through the motions, attended work, ate, slept, but inside, I was fragmented. I had conversations with myself, long, silent dialogues where I tried to make sense of everything, where I questioned my worth, his choices, the very nature of love and trust. I replayed every memory, every touch, every laugh, searching for clues, searching for answers that would never come. And in those quiet, desperate moments, I began to understand something frightening. I might never get the closure I craved, and yet, I had to find a way to live with that uncertainty, to carry on despite it. One afternoon, as I wandered through the park again, I noticed a couple sitting on a bench, holding hands, their laughter drifting to me on the breeze. I felt a pang so sharp it almost knocked me off the swing I had been sitting on. I wanted to scream, to demand that life stop, that it wait for me to catch up. But instead, I closed my eyes and let the tears fall. I let myself feel every ounce of pain, every shred of betrayal, every fragment of love lost. And when the crying subsided, a strange clarity settled over me. I didn't need him to validate my worth. I didn't need answers from him to find my own strength. The path ahead was uncertain, terrifying, and lonely, but it was mine. And somehow, that realization sparked a flicker of hope. That night, I returned to my apartment and sat by the window, watching the city lights shimmer in the darkness. I thought about the life I had imagined, the love I had believed in, and the heartbreak that had shattered it all. And yet, I also thought about the person I was becoming, the strength I was discovering within myself, and the resilience that was quietly rising from the ruins of my shattered world. I realized that pain, as devastating as it was, could also be a teacher, a guide, showing me the depths of my heart, the limits of my endurance, and the untapped courage that had always been there, waiting for this moment to reveal itself. By the end of that night, I felt a small, stubborn determination taking root. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if he would come back, if I would find love again, or if the pieces of my heart would ever fully heal. But I knew one thing: I would survive. Somehow, some way, I would keep moving forward, even if it hurt, even if the world felt cruel and unkind, even if the person I loved most had walked away. I would survive, and in that survival, I would find the beginning of my own story. One that didn't depend on anyone else's choices or betrayals. One that belonged entirely to me. The next morning, I woke up to an emptiness that felt heavier than usual, as if the world itself had shifted and left me behind. I had barely slept, tossing and turning, haunted by thoughts I couldn't escape. I kept picturing him, imagining what he might be doing, imagining that other person, imagining the moments they were sharing, moments that should have been ours. The thought made my chest tighten so much I could barely breathe, but I couldn't look away from it. I had to know, I had to understand, and somehow, some desperate part of me hoped that maybe, just maybe, I was wrong, that there was an explanation that could make this nightmare end. I decided I couldn't stay in my apartment any longer. The walls felt like they were closing in, suffocating me with memories. I walked to the cafe, our cafe, the one where we had once planned our future, over cappuccinos and laughter. I tried to sit at our usual table, but I couldn't. My hands shook, my heart pounded, and I felt like a stranger in my own life. Then I saw him, not in the cafe, but across the street, talking to someone whose presence made my stomach twist into knots. I froze, my legs refusing to move, my eyes glued to them. He looked happy, smiling, laughing, like I didn't exist. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow, and I stumbled back, gripping the edge of a wall to steady myself. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could do was watch, trapped in the horror of reality. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. I wanted to confront him, demand answers, demand the truth, demand him to feel the weight of what he had done. But something inside me, a mix of fear, disbelief, and heartbreak, rooted me to the spot. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. The world spun around me, and all I could hear was the echo of my own heartbeat, frantic, desperate, broken. And then he looked up directly at me. Our eyes met, and for a split second, everything froze. I wanted him to feel shame, to look away, to realize what he had done, but he didn't. He just held my gaze for a second, a faint flicker of recognition passing across his face before he turned back to the other person. And in that moment, I realized something I had been afraid to admit. He had already chosen, he had made his decision, and it wasn't me. I ran. I don't even remember where my feet carried me, only the desperate need to escape, to disappear, to hide from the reality that had shattered my world. I found myself in the park, the one where we had shared dreams and secrets, and I collapsed onto a bench, letting the tears flow freely. I screamed into the night, into the empty streets, into the darkness that seemed to embrace me. Every sound echoed back, mocking me, reminding me of what I had lost, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the sudden realization that the person I loved most could hurt me so deeply it was almost unbearable. Hours passed, though I didn't keep track. I couldn't. Time felt meaningless, a cruel trick the universe played on me as I sat alone in the park, shaking, sobbing, trying to understand how everything I had believed in could be torn away in a single instant. I thought about calling him, confronting him, demanding answers, but I couldn't. Not yet. I wasn't strong enough. I wasn't ready. I could barely breathe, let alone speak. And in that moment, amidst the tears and the agony, I realized something even more terrifying. I couldn't go back to the way things were. I couldn't pretend that everything was normal, that love could survive when it had been so completely broken. By the time I returned home, the city was quiet, the streets empty, the night wrapping around me like a heavy blanket. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall, feeling the weight of betrayal pressed down like a physical force. I replayed every memory, every moment we had shared, trying to find some trace of the person I thought I knew. But the harder I searched, the more it slipped away, like sand through my fingers. I realized that I didn't just feel hurt. I felt unmoored, like the foundation of my life had been ripped from beneath me. Every plan, every hope, every dream we had built together was gone, or at least, gone in the way I had believed it existed. And then came the messages, one after another, short, detached, cold. "I'm sorry, I need time, I have to figure things out." They were the same words I had read before, but this time they felt sharper, crueler, like tiny knives cutting deeper with every repetition. I couldn't respond. I couldn't think. I could only sit there, feeling each word hit me like a wave, dragging me under, making it hard to hold on to anything solid. And amidst it all, a new feeling emerged, one I hadn't expected. Fear. Fear not for myself, but for the person I had trusted, for the choices he had made, for the path he had taken that no longer included me. The following day, I forced myself to go outside again, to move through the world, to pretend that I was functioning. But everything felt surreal, like I was watching life from the outside, unable to participate, unable to connect. People smiled, laughed, lived, and I envied them all. I envied their certainty, their security, their ability to love without this shadow hanging over them. I envied them because I didn't know if I could ever feel that way again, not without the memory of betrayal, the taste of heartbreak, the hollow ache that had become my constant companion. And then, that evening, came the confrontation I had both feared and hoped for. He appeared at my door, unannounced, and for a moment, I couldn't move. My body froze, my mind raced, and every emotion I had tried to bury erupted at once. Anger, fear, sorrow, longing, disbelief. He looked at me with a mixture of guilt and something I couldn't name. And I realized I wanted answers, wanted him to feel the weight of what he had done. I wanted him to explain why he had chosen someone else, why he had decided our love wasn't enough, why everything we had built together could be so easily discarded. And yet, as he opened his mouth to speak, I felt a flicker of uncertainty, a small hope that maybe, somehow, he could still make things right. But deep down, I knew that the truth, when it came, would change everything, forever. He stood there, just inside my doorway, and I stared at him like I was seeing a stranger and a ghost at the same time. The person I had loved, trusted, and planned my life with was in front of me, yet he felt distant, unrecognizable. The words I had waited for, feared, and hoped for all at once were finally coming, but my chest felt like it might explode from the weight of anticipation and dread. He hesitated, searching my face, as if trying to gauge how much pain I could bear, how much of my heartbreak he could see. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I was too raw, too exposed. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of the city outside. Finally, he spoke, his voice low, hesitant, full of a mix of guilt and confusion. "Alec, I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I needed to understand my feelings, to figure out who I really am." His words faltered, tripping over the truth he had already inflicted on me. I could feel the honesty in his voice, but it did nothing to soothe the storm raging inside me. Every syllable reminded me of the weeks of emptiness, of the nights spent crying alone, of the betrayal I had endured. And yet, beneath the pain, beneath the anger, I realized something remarkable. I was still standing. I was still Alec Rose. I took a deep breath, the first real one in days, and let the words spill from my mouth, unfiltered, raw. "You broke everything, not just with me, but inside me. You made me doubt love, trust, and myself. And yet, I'm still here. I'm still me, and I won't let this destroy who I am." The strength in my voice surprised even me. It surprised him, too, judging by the way he flinched, like my words had landed with the force of a storm he hadn't anticipated. He opened his mouth to reply, but I held up a hand, cutting him off. I didn't need his explanations, his apologies, or his attempts at justification. I needed to reclaim myself. I needed to feel whole again, not with him, not because of him, but despite him. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of calm, a sense of clarity that had been buried under the rubble of heartbreak. I realized that love could be cruel, that betrayal could shake the foundation of even the strongest hearts, but it could also illuminate a path to resilience, courage, and self-discovery. I had spent so long defining myself by my love for him, by our shared dreams, by the future we had imagined together. But now, I understood that my life didn't depend on someone else's choices. My happiness, my strength, my worth, they were mine alone. And for the first time in a long while, I felt a spark of freedom, fragile but real. He looked at me, searching, perhaps hoping for reconciliation, perhaps fearing the finality of what he had done. But I had no answers to give him, no tears to shed, no surrender to offer. I only had the truth I had rediscovered within myself, that I would survive, that I would heal, and that I would not be defined by someone else's betrayal. I took a step back, feeling the weight of my own power, the quiet strength that had emerged from the depths of heartbreak. And then, with a gentle but firm voice, I said, "It's over. Not because I hate you, not because I want revenge, but because I love myself enough to let go." He nodded, a mix of regret and understanding flickering across his face. And for a moment, I felt pity not for him, but for the choices he had made, for the person he had revealed himself to be. And then he turned and left, leaving me standing in the doorway. The quiet hum of the city surrounding me, the night stretching endlessly before me. I closed the door behind him, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt the air in my lungs, the pulse in my veins, the simple, undeniable fact that I was alive, whole, and capable of moving forward. The following days were not easy. I still carried the pain, the memories, and the ache of what had been lost. But I also carried something new, a sense of self, a knowledge that I could endure, that I could face the world without depending on someone else to validate my existence. I walked the streets alone, visited the park where we had shared dreams, sat in the cafe where laughter once filled the air, and each time I felt a little stronger, a little braver, a little more myself. The heartbreak was still there, lingering like a shadow, but it no longer controlled me. I was learning to coexist with it, to let it remind me of my resilience, rather than my fragility. I began to reconnect with friends, to open my heart to laughter, to new experiences, to the simple joys of life I had forgotten in the wake of betrayal. I found strength in the quiet moments, in the small victories, in the realization that the world still had beauty, still had hope, and still had possibilities I had never imagined. And in those moments, I understood something profound. Life doesn't stop because someone betrays you. Love doesn't end because it is broken. You survive, you heal, and you grow, not despite the pain, but because of it. Looking back now, I realize that the hardest moments in life are also the ones that teach us who we truly are. I was Alec Rose, once heartbroken, once betrayed, once lost, and yet I emerged stronger, wiser, and more aware of my own worth than I had ever been. The man I loved is no longer part of my story, but that story, the one I am still writing, belongs entirely to me. It belongs to my courage, my resilience, and my refusal to let heartbreak define my future. And as I stand here, in the quiet of my apartment, watching the city lights flicker, I ask myself a question I hope you will ask yourself too. How many times will you let someone else's choices define your life? And when will you finally take back the story that belongs only to you? I am Alec Rose, and this is my story. A story of love, betrayal, heartbreak, and survival. A story that reminds me, and I hope reminds anyone listening, that even in the darkest, most painful moments, there is always a spark of strength waiting to ignite, a path forward waiting to be walked, and a life waiting to be reclaimed.